The most powerful room in the world is not always in Washington. Sometimes it is cruising at 45,000 feet above the middle of an ocean. At that altitude, whether over the Atlantic or the Pacific, the President of the United States can do something almost no other person on Earth can do from an aircraft. He can authorize a nuclear strike. He can order the movement of troops on the other side of the planet. He can hold a fully encrypted video conference with the leader of any nation on Earth through communication so hardened that even a nuclear detonation in the atmosphere below would not knock them out. At 45,000 feet, he remains the most powerful decision-maker on Earth because the aircraft around him was built to ensure that presidential authority never loses its reach. Now when it comes to Xi Jinping, the most powerful man in China, the leader of the world's second-largest economy and its fastest-growing military. He flies internationally and he does it in a modified commercial airliner. A regular Air China Boeing 747, temporarily refitted with a bedroom and an office, then converted back to a passenger jet when he lands. For years, that aircraft could not securely communicate with Beijing while airborne. Analysts who studied the setup concluded that while Xi was in the air, he was effectively cut off from meaningful command and control of his own country. Here are two leaders, two aircraft, and two completely different answers to the question of what it means to project power from 40,000 feet. And the gap between those two answers tells you more about the difference between American and Chinese global ambition than almost any weapon system, budget figure, or diplomatic statement ever could. Today we are going inside both aircraft, what they carry, what they can do, what they cost, and what they say about the countries that built them. And some of what is on board Air Force One is so far beyond what most people realize that it genuinely changes what you think this aircraft is. Drop a comment right now. What do you think is the most classified thing on Air Force One? Let's see what you come up with before we get into it. The flying White House that can survive a nuclear war. Most people think of Air Force One as a very fancy airplane. A big blue and white 747 with comfortable seats, good food, and a famous paint job designed by Jackie Kennedy in 1962 and barely changed since. That image is not wrong, but it is about as complete as describing a nuclear submarine as a long metal boat. The exterior is the least interesting thing about it. The aircraft the president currently flies is the VC-25A, a heavily modified Boeing 747-200B that entered service in 1990. Two of them exist, both maintained at Joint Base Andrews in Maryland, so that if one is undergoing maintenance, the other is always available within hours. The call sign Air Force One applies to whichever aircraft has the president aboard. When the president is not on board, the same aircraft is simply SAM 28,000 or SAM 29,000, and any VIP can fly in it without triggering the Air Force One protocols. The interior covers 4,000 square feet across 3 levels. There is a presidential suite with a private office, bedroom, and bathroom. There is a conference room that doubles as a dining room and can be converted into a full medical facility. The aircraft carries also a qualified physician on every flight and maintains a supply of the president's blood type at all times. There are separate sections for senior staff, Secret Service, and the press pool, plus 2 full galleys capable of serving 100 meals simultaneously. Up to 70 passengers can be accommodated in addition to the flight crew. But none of that is what makes Air Force One genuinely extraordinary. What makes it extraordinary is what you cannot see. The aircraft carries 238 miles of wiring, which is 6 times more than a standard 747. Every inch of that wiring, every relay, every antenna, every communication system is either hardened against electromagnetic pulse or duplicated so that a backup exists if the primary fails. The reason for that hardening goes back to the Cold War and has never stopped being relevant. If a nuclear weapon detonates in the atmosphere above or near the aircraft, the electromagnetic pulse it generates would disable every unprotected electronic system within hundreds of miles. Air Force One is designed to keep flying and keep communicating through that event. The communication suite is classified in its specifics but confirmed in its capabilities. The President can reach the Pentagon, NORAD, the Nuclear Command Authority, the leaders of allied nations, and emergency services anywhere on Earth through encrypted channels that operate across multiple redundant systems simultaneously. Secure phone, secure video conference, encrypted data links, all of it is operational while moving at 600 miles per hour at 45,000 feet, and all of it is still working if the world below has just experienced the worst thing that has ever happened to it. The defensive systems are equally serious. Air Force One carries the ANAL-Q-204 infrared jamming system, which actively confuses heat-seeking missiles by emitting a disrupting signal that breaks their guidance lock. It carries missile approach warning sensors that detect incoming threats. It carries chaff and flare dispensers. It carries the directional infrared countermeasure system, also known as DIRC, which tracks incoming missiles and fires a laser to blind their seeker heads. Some of these systems are partially visible on the exterior of the aircraft if you know where to look. Others remain classified. What is confirmed is that the aircraft can actively defend itself against the kind of man-portable surface-to-air missiles that have threatened presidential aircraft since the 1970s. The aircraft can also be refueled in the air, extending its range to unlimited in theory. The president can stay airborne for as long as necessary during a crisis, continuing to govern from altitude indefinitely. The pilots are always active-duty Air Force officers selected through a rigorous security process. Every member of the crew, from the flight deck to the galley, holds a top-secret clearance. Before any presidential flight, the Secret Service conducts security sweeps of every airport on the itinerary, establishes ground security perimeters, and pre-positions emergency response assets at each stop. Air Force One is not just transportation, it is a survivable command post. The president can do anything from that aircraft that he can do from the White House Situation Room, and he can do it from anywhere on Earth. Said former White House Communications Agency official, "What you just saw describes the current aircraft. A 747-200 that entered service in 1990 and is now over 35 years old. The replacement program has been running for years and has become one of the most chaotic procurement stories in recent American aviation history. But first, let's go to China, because what Xi Jinping has been flying in is genuinely surprising given everything else China has been building. China's presidential aircraft, the most powerful leader with a borrowed plane. China, the world's second largest economy, a country that has built stealth fighters and aircraft carriers and hypersonic missiles and a space station, does not have a dedicated presidential aircraft. Or at least, it did not for most of the past 2 decades. For years, when Xi Jinping traveled internationally, he flew in a regular Air China Boeing 747-400, tail number B2472, that also flew commercial passenger routes when the president was not using it. Before each presidential trip, the aircraft would be pulled from service, stripped of its commercial seating in the forward section, and refitted with a living room, a bedroom, and an office, a process that took about 3 weeks. Then Xi would fly internationally in it, and after he landed, the aircraft would be refitted back to commercial configuration and returned to the Air China schedule. An Asia Times analysis published in 2017 described the security implications of this arrangement in detail that Beijing has never officially acknowledged or disputed. Unlike Air Force One, the aircraft had no military-grade radar to monitor surrounding airspace. It had no aerial refueling capability. Its communications could be intercepted because the encryption was not military-grade, meaning that while Xi was in the air, communications from the aircraft were vulnerable in ways that American intelligence services, among others, were certainly aware of. The most consequential conclusion in that analysis was direct. While airborne in the 747-400, Xi Jinping could not meaningfully command China's military forces in a crisis. He was, essentially, temporarily unreachable by his own country's command structure. This was not a secret that China was comfortable with. The Chinese government's official response when journalists raised it was revealing in its own way. A foreign ministry spokesperson said that the aircraft was provided by Air China, not owned by the military, that safety and cost considerations had guided the decision, and that there were no plans for China to acquire a dedicated presidential jet. The framing was deliberate because Xi had introduced an austerity campaign when he came to power in 2013, cracking down on official extravagance. Flying in a commercial aircraft, even a modified one, was politically consistent with that message. But the gap was real, and it was being addressed in ways that were not publicly announced. By 2016, a newer Boeing 747-8, tail number B2479, was being used for presidential travel after undergoing VIP modifications at a facility in Hamburg, Germany. This aircraft is a genuine upgrade. The 747-8 is a far more capable platform than the 747-400, with greater range, better fuel efficiency, and more space for the kind of modifications a head of state's aircraft requires. It has been confirmed to carry advanced communication systems and security upgrades. What those systems include in detail, whether they approach military grade, whether the communications are meaningfully encrypted, whether the aircraft carries any defensive countermeasures, is not publicly known. What is known is that the B2479 still operates as part of Air China's fleet when not in presidential service. It is not a military aircraft. It does not carry a military call sign. Its pilots are Air China commercial pilots selected for presidential duty, not active duty military officers with top secret clearances, flying an aircraft owned and operated by the Air Force. The entire arrangement reflects a different philosophy about what a leader's aircraft needs to be and whether the symbolism and capability investment of a dedicated Air Force One equivalent is worth the cost and the political optics. There is no special plane for Chinese leaders. The planes are provided by Air China, said Liu Peixiong, former director of the Protocol Department, Chinese Foreign Ministry, 2015. That quote was accurate when it was said, and it reflects something genuine about how China has chosen to project its leadership image. But here is where it starts to get more complicated, because China has been quietly working on something that changes this picture. And the Air Force One replacement story on the American side has taken a turn so strange that it became international news for reasons nobody expected. The Qatar jet, the Boeing delays, and what China is quietly building. The story of Air Force One's replacement program is one of those Pentagon procurement sagas that would seem implausible if it were fiction. The current VC-25A aircraft entered service in 1990. By the early 2010s, it was becoming clear they needed replacing. Parts for the 747-200 airframe are no longer commercially available because no airline flies them anymore, meaning components have to be custom manufactured or salvaged at enormous cost. The annual maintenance bill for the two aircraft runs to $84 million a year. Operating cost per flight hour reached $210,000 by recent estimates, making it the single most expensive aircraft in the U.S. Air Force fleet to operate. In 2015, the Air Force contracted Boeing to build two replacement aircraft, the VC-25B, based on the newer 7478 airframe. The contract price was $3.9 billion for two jets. Boeing has been struggling to deliver. Production delays pushed the original 2024 delivery date to 2027 for the first aircraft and 2028 for the second. Boeing's financial difficulties, its manufacturing quality problems, and the complexity of the modifications required have combined to turn a straightforward replacement into a years-long saga that has frustrated multiple administrations. Into that gap came one of the more extraordinary procurement decisions in recent American history. In May 2025, Qatar's royal family offered the Trump administration a Boeing 747-8 luxury jet valued at approximately $400 million as a gift for use as an interim Air Force One. The offer was accepted. The aircraft, an extraordinarily lavish private jet originally configured for Qatari royalty, was taken into Air Force custody, modified at a cost the Pentagon initially classified but later confirmed at roughly $400 million. and fitted with the communication systems, defensive countermeasures, and security infrastructure required for presidential transport. By mid-2026, it was flight tested, painted in Trump's preferred red, white, and blue livery, and ready for service as the VC-25B bridge aircraft, while the permanent replacements continue their delayed journey through Boeing's production challenges. The security debate around the Qatari aircraft was immediate and substantive. Intelligence professionals and congressional members raised concerns about whether a jet that had spent years in foreign hands, however friendly, could be fully secured for the most sensitive communications on Earth. The Air Force maintained that the modifications were comprehensive and that the aircraft met all requirements. The classified nature of what was done during that $400 million retrofit means the full answer to those questions is not publicly available. Meanwhile, China's approach to its presidential aircraft has been evolving more quietly. The B-2479 Boeing 7478 that now carries Xi Jinping on international visits is a significantly more capable platform than the 747-400 it replaced. And the modifications performed in Hamburg in 2016 are widely believed to have included communication upgrades that address at least some of the vulnerabilities the Asia Times analysis identified. China has also been developing its own large commercial aircraft known as the COMAC C919 with long-term ambitions that include a potential VIP variant. Whether China eventually transitions its leadership to a domestically produced aircraft, and what that aircraft's capabilities would include, is a question that defense analysts are watching with genuine interest. What China has not done, and this remains significant, is build a dedicated military presidential transport with the command and control architecture, the defensive systems, and the nuclear survivability features that define Air Force One. The philosophy behind that decision is either impressive strategic restraint and political messaging, or a genuine capability gap that China has not yet decided to close. Air Force One is 35 years old, costs $210,000 an hour to fly, and its replacement has been delayed by years of Boeing production problems. Although none of that changes what it fundamentally is, the most sophisticated head of state transport ever built, a flying command post that has been refined through decades of real-world operation and built around a doctrine of presidential survivability that has no equivalent anywhere else on Earth. The new VC-25Bs, when they finally arrive, will extend that capability for another generation. And whatever the interim story of the Qatari jet turns out to be, the underlying architecture, the communications, the hardening, the military crew, the continuity of government mission remains unchanged. China's presidential aircraft is capable, improving, and backed by a country that is investing seriously in every dimension of military and technological capability. The 7478 is a better platform than what Xi flew 5 years ago, and what comes after it will likely be better still. But the gap between what Air Force One represents and what China currently flies its leader in is not primarily a gap in hardware. It is a gap in institutional commitment to the idea that the leader must be able to govern from anywhere, under any circumstances, including the worst ones. That commitment is written into every system on Air Force One in a way that no modification of a commercial airliner can yet replicate. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What surprised you most about this comparison, and do you think China builds a true Air Force One equivalent in the next 10 years? Or does the political messaging of flying commercial remain more valuable to Beijing than the capability gap it represents? I will be reading every comment